Okay. OBS says we're streaming, and so does YouTube. Okay, everyone agrees. We are now streaming. Hello and welcome. That was my notes doc. Hello and welcome to another edition of Nonfiction Book Club. We're back. I'm Nicole Sweeney. You're on my YouTube channel, where I come and do this, and 2 to 3 times a year, I might make another little video.
Yeah, you made one recently.
I
You did
did.
like a little BookTube
I
video.
did a BookTube newbie tag for my 16-year-old YouTube channel. It was really just so that I could bully some of our other friends into making YouTube videos. That
Yeah,
was really it. That was the
yeah.
sole
I
purpose.
do feel like anytime I upload something to YouTube now, I feel like a newbie. I
Oh.
am like, how does this
Do
work?
I go
I've been
here?
like editing. Yeah, I've been like working on this video. Like I have this video that I've been working on since probably literally last year, maybe a little bit under a year, that was like about my pregnancy at the time. And I am still like working on it.
Uh-huh.
And I just like am dreading the moment where I'm finally done and now have to remember how to upload things to YouTube.
Yeah.
And like, it's never gonna happen.
Sure,
I
sure.
only know how to live stream anymore.
What else do you have to say by way of introduction about who you are?
Oh yeah,
If
yeah.
you
I'm
don't
Deboki. I'm
already.
on Okie Dokie Boki, and I also will sometimes make videos and post them. Look forward to one day learning about how I felt in the middle of my second trimester. It
Yeah.
is funny revisiting the video and being like, "Oh yeah, that is how I felt."
Yes, yes. That was such a trip when I made my hour-long video about getting my pilot's license. I mean, because like really truly,
Yeah,
like I'm not exaggerating. I have like days, like full days worth of like footage from that. And like going back and
yeah,
watching stuff. And it was also just like the emotional whiplash of clips that were genuinely recorded like 10 minutes apart where I was like, "Oh, you just cycled through all of the emotions. You had them all."
yeah. Yep.
And I don't really know how to deal with that. But I guess it's all gonna go there. Okay, bye.
Yeah.
um, it's funny that we're talking a little bit about like the creative experience here, just as part of our introductions, because that is some part of what we're gonna be
The
talking
book.
about today. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
this month's book is Mood Machine: The Rise of Spotify and the Costs of the Perfect Playlist by Liz Pelly, which is about Spotify, yes, but it is also about like the state of the music industry and the internet and like the impact of the internet on the creative economy more broadly. And there, I have so many feelings. I just have
I
so
know.
many
I was gonna say,
feelings.
I'm sure we have no thoughts, no feelings about this. This doesn't impact both our personal and professional and
Like,
creative lives all wrapped up.
I just am like baffled by how I didn't see that. Like I was caught off guard by that.
Yeah.
Like it just didn't even occur to
Right.
me. I was like, oh, because we're talking about music and like Spotify and I don't know, whatever.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I'm reading it and I'm like,
This is not
oh,
about me.
this is actually constantly about me.
Yeah.
um but like both on the sort of like creative side of things, but also like there are ways in which if you are the kind of person whose relationship with culture is online enough that you're here now, this is about you.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is
Yeah, we are a niche enough live stream that this is
if
actually
you're
about
watching
you
this,
too. Yeah.
100%. I don't care if you use Spotify or not. This book is about you, actually. So
Yeah. Yeah. You may have never uploaded a single thing to the internet.
never uploaded a single thing to the internet. Maybe
Not
you don't
even
use
to a
Spotify.
Dropbox.
Not even to a Dropbox. I feel like surely you can't be here now and not have uploaded something to the internet.
Yeah. Yeah. At this point, we're
I feel
all the
really
point of this
confident
book
that
is that we are
the Venn
constantly
diagram of
uploading.
people who will watch this live stream and people who have uploaded stuff to the internet is a circle. I'm very
Yeah.
sure of that. Anyway,
Yeah.
this is tone setting. I feel that we're going to be on this sort of existential grind for the next hour. So buckle up,
Yes.
welcome. I feel like it's helpful when doing the sort of like high level intros to these books Yes, Colby. I meant you specifically should feel called
Yeah.
out.
Yes.
I like doing a lot of sort of info dumping at the top of the nonfiction book club
Mhm.
live streams, because I do feel like you shouldn't have to have read the book to be able to follow along the conversation.
Right.
And I feel like the easiest
And
way
we're chaos agents, so
And
it's
we're
like useful to have the
chaos
good
agents.
thing in the beginning to ground everything.
Exactly. I had to pull up my notes to get so briefly. Everybody saw. I think you saw how many unread emails I have. That's a problem. Listen, don't worry about it. Okay. So what this book is. So I'm just like speed running the chapters because I feel like that's the easiest way to explain,
Do it.
Get the high level, right? So you got Bureau of Piracy, which is giving the I don't know, context of the internet. So you have like late 90s, early aughts, and music piracy rampant. That's like important sort of stage setting for then chapter 2 for like the creation of Spotify. And so chapter 2 is saving the music industry, which is a big part of like Spotify's early myth making. But actually Spotify was like the founders of Spotify were making ad tools. Like they wanted to sell ads, and that was their business plan, but they needed something to sell ads against. And oh look, here's the music industry struggling real bad, we'll save it with our, I don't know, this is like very classic tech bro,
Yeah.
We've heard it all 1,000 times. Actually this saving the music industry chapter is my only read little tab, because it's a thing that I've been like obsessive. I have like a whole like notes app and like a Google Doc of like things that I've been trying to coalesce together into something. The summary of which is actually we'll circle back to this. I'm explaining the book.
Okay. I'm excited for the red tab.
The red tab. I'll get to this.
Yeah. I'm going to make a note.
Ask her about the red tab.
Yeah. Yeah.
Selling lean back listening. So this is like, okay, so we have Spotify, it exists now. And what if actually this is selling lean back listening, I think, is when we get to the Thomas Edison, or is that later? Fuck Thomas Edison.
The Muzak
always has to come up, when you're talking about the history of like technology, capitalism, whatever. Thomas Edison did something nefarious. You can sort of count on that.
Yeah.
Selling lean back listening. Oh, and the Conquest of Chill. Those two chapters are both kind of about like that, like broadly, of like, I don't know, lean back listening, like the idea of music as background, as opposed to music as like, I am now going to sit and listen to art, which inevitably leads us to Ghost Artists for Hire. So it's like Ghost Artists for Hire. That's the chapter about, I think that's when they first introduced the playlist perfect fit content, PFC. This is a thing that comes up like throughout. But they hire musicians to record perfect fit content, which is like that's like the term that they use for it, to like round out playlists, basically. Like they're geared towards, so Spotify has these, like, the mood driven playlists, obviously, and they hire, like they create music for it, which obviously they get to have incredible royalty rates for because it's theirs. That's like a kind of an underlying thing throughout. Background music makers, what is that one? I don't remember what that one was now.
It's more about PFC, like basically like how you kind of approach it.
Yeah, okay, yes. So
yeah, I mean, one thing I'll say, like, this book is like very dense for how thin it is. Like, yes. I felt like I was just like constantly like, what did I just read? Like, I had to go back and take like the little chapter summary notes too. Yes. In a way that I like don't always have to do.
Same. I often do not do it. Part of how I was reading this is that I was like reading it, like, listening to it, and also, following along and like taking my little notes and my tabs and stuff. And then like when I was lying in bed doing my little like phone game decompress, I would just re-listen to the chapter that I had just read, just as like did I process that? Because
smart.
I didn't always, if I'm being honest, but or it was just like there kept being things that I had so many big feelings about that I was like, I actually am not processing the next couple paragraphs because I'm still thinking about something you said a couple pages ago.
Right.
Streambait pop. Oh, data. This is where we start getting into like the data of it all. So Streambait pop
Yeah.
is about like the way in which Spotify is encouraging artists to gear their music towards streaming, and then listen to yourself is kind of the other side of the data. That's like the personal piece of it. That's like the like what,
As listener.
yes, as a listener, like what, and like to what degree are your tastes being dictated by Spotify itself. I have, yeah, so what this, I have another quote from this one too, which is, what types of patterns are the systems looking for? How are those patterns already influenced by how the platform shapes behavior? In a sense, asking what the streaming algorithms of the 2020s are optimizing for isn't too different from age-old music media questions, like to what extent is commercialism influencing editorial? But there were bigger stakes too. What systems were being strengthened through all of this optimization? So that's that. Authenticity, another like favorite topic of Deboki and mine. Another thing that one day we'll do we'll just about authenticity for an hour instead of talking about a book.
Yeah. Yeah.
Self-driving music. What was the self-driving music chapter?
That's really talking about hyperpop. I kind of saw it as like almost like recreating genres via playlists. More about data-driven creation.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a lot of different ways that this data-driven creation is like happening. Yeah, I think the key sentence, it's a top-down version of culture branding itself as bottom-up version of culture, like the way that the culture is being dictated.
And then in that same way, then fandom as data is like another sort of like one, I don't know, in the same way that like you get pop, listen to yourself, you get self-driving music, fandom as data kind of situation. I didn't actually, it's the one chapter that I have no tabs in. I have no tabs in fandom as data, which is almost ironic to me in some sense. Fan culture reshaped by algorithmic ubiquitousness, which is to say by tools of surveillance. Oh, that's the one where she quotes our girl Shoshana Zuboff. And then
I think that's in a few chapters before. That's
true. The surveillance thing comes up over and over again. So you have sounds for self optimization. So that's like wellness playlists, which also just like very dark. So there's just something so dark sided about reading some of that. They're talking about like music therapists and like playlists about like basically music therapists being like, Spotify can't just throw a bunch of shit on a playlist and call it music therapy. Like, music therapy is a real thing. What are you doing? This is a problem. Streaming as surveillance is basically just about all the data that they have on you, which like
this is the Shoshana Zuboff.
Yes.
Because I wrote specifically, I'm surprised it took so long to get here.
Well, she was ramping up.
She sure was.
At you like right away. We were ready. We've been primed, but Liz wanted to make sure that everybody else was ready. By the time she threw, hey, guess what? They know an insane amount of information about you, and it's actually really creepy. The first 35 cents is the hardest, and An App for a Boss are both very much about like the labor. This is where we're kind of heading into the end game here,
right?
Which is like the labor conditions that Spotify has created for musicians. So first 0.0035 is the hardest. That's like a common number for how much they make per stream, but like that's really not even real. But it's like it is highlighting that the money just isn't there. They talk about like the tiers of artists, like how they consider artists like making money off of Spotify, and they're regarding people whose whole team makes like 10 grand as an artist who is living off of their money, and it's just living off of their art, just like wild and not correct, not how that works. App for a Boss is again sort of like the way that you're catering to Spotify's whims and demands for artists. Indie Vibes is about like the co-opting like what indie even means on Spotify, and the way that like Spotify has co-opted indie scenes, and like I don't know, the broad reaching consequences that has. This is Payola is basically that very much as it sounds. It's about like pay to play sort of schemes on Spotify and the ways that Spotify has gotten artists to pay them. Really, like the long and short of it is it's about all the ways that Spotify is getting artists to pay them, which is really fucked and bad. The Lobbyists is chapter 17, and that is about Spotify's relationship with government. Again, it's just getting darker and darker here, building towards the new labor movement. And the new labor movement is about like attempts to unionize artists, and then that's sort of setting us up to conclusion of like I feel like the conclusion that she comes to in the end is very much, she talks about like the fact that like one size fits all solutions are broadly bad. Like one of the like the if you had to pick a like I don't know a couple core things that she's saying, like one of the core things that is terrible about what Spotify has done to music and to culture is a flattening, is like trying to make a single like system or solution work for all things in a way that it simply cannot. So the conclusion also actually talks about like library streaming models, and has like a bunch of kind of really interesting ideas in it. And that is Mood Machine.
Yeah.
What
it
do
is
you think?
Good. And it's like, I mean, like we usually say this for the end, but also at this point, we're also used to the fact that we kind of open with, what did you think? Yeah. And I think, I mean, like I said, I was surprised by how dense the book ended up feeling, where I would like go back and like revisit. Like I was going back through my notes to kind of just like make sure I remembered, and there were so many things I already forgot because my brain had already like filled it in with other knowledge from the book. And like I was like, oh right, like I had just read this 2 days ago, but I was already moving on to thinking about this thing, and I like forgot there was all of this extended discussion about something else, because there's so much, and I feel like she did a really good job of covering a lot. And I think also being really, I think she did a good job of, or I think like what I found really effective about the book is that she really kind of like explained the way that this was impacting music as a scene. Like her background that she explains early on is coming from indie music, and so she's really talking about it as not just the music, but like as a community, and like as like a joint venture. And she's talking about the loss of this very specific aspect of it that I found really helpful for kind of then contextualizing a lot of the other things that she's talking about in the book.
Yeah, we said this at the top, but I just like there's the thing that really surprised me about this is just how far-reaching it is in terms of what like what she's talking about, and like the implications. But there's a way in which that like works because she's so focused. Like her sort of core focus, her core like interest, the thing that like appears to matter most to her is that indie scene, but it allows her to make a lot of like really good like broader connections too, by looking at that, like the consequence that it has there. I don't know where to start.
And then like the million crises. I mean, we can jump right into like, I don't know if we want to start away from the ways in which this book is too deeply relatable as people who like make things on the internet.
Well, let's
go. But it did. I think there was like a moment where she was talking about the lean back listening, where I feel like a lot of disparate threads of like how people have been talking about streaming in general like really coalesced to me, because it made me think a lot about Netflix. And so the idea behind lean back listening, for the people who haven't read the book, is that I didn't process that this was like, a thing that Spotify is obviously doing. But what Spotify really realized is that they get a lot of people to listen to music as like an ambient thing. And like at some point you don't really need to, like for these playlists that are like the brain food kind of playlists. I think like the one I listen to a lot is like brain food, I think. I don't know, deep focus, those kind of playlists. They're just things that you put on because you want a sound, and then you just go do something else. And like, so Spotify has really like kind of realized that that's a great way to make money, because you just like have people on the app listening to this music that they're not really listening to. And so especially combining with like other payment structures where they'll pay people like fewer royalties to like less out of the royalties to like let them have more of a spot on a playlist and get more streams. Like it's just like it's created a lot of incentives for the type of music that Spotify really wants to highlight and really wants to get you to listen to. That's really about you not listening to it. And that was reminding me of like things that I think people have said about Netflix, in terms of Netflix now being like, we want to make shows that people can watch while they're also on their phone. And I was like, oh, right. Because all of this is like just like a fight for us to have the app open. Like at this point, it's not even like completely a fight for our attention.
No.
It's like a fight just to make sure that we have it there and running.
Yep. Yep. Yeah, I like to that end have been, I don't know, like struggling my own personal struggle to reclaim my own attention. I had this moment last fall. We watched Shogun for Snark Squad Pod, and I watched the first, I think, 2 episodes, and then finally had to switch to the dubbed version because I actually couldn't. I think if I had been like watching it week on week, I maybe would have been able to do it, but I was like, I actually can't binge like 10 hours of TV without like looking at my phone.
Yeah.
I am so
Right.
broken that it was like I
Yeah.
was struggling through the 2 episodes
Yep.
that I did watch before I was like, I actually have to switch to the dubbed version. And then I was watching the dubbed
Yeah.
version, and I was like frustrated, even as the dub is really good on that show, I will say, but it's also like it's different. Like you like I'm like I'm no
Yeah.
longer having the experience that I was intended to have, and I'm so frustrated because I feel like 10 years ago I could have like what is happening to my brain that I cannot just sit here and watch it. Like
Yeah.
genuinely the best show I watched all year, a very very good TV show.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of, they actually talk about that. That's kind of, this isn't where I was going with this, but there's a bit where they're talking about I think it's in the data, like the when they're talking about you and like the like data, like how you understand your own listening, and like how somebody who she interviewed is talking about how he wouldn't necessarily regard like some of the records that he considered the most impactful are not necessarily things that would show up in his like top 100 by listening hours, because they're things that ask more of him, demand more of him. So like, they're not things that you're going to return to. I mean, he's like phrased it as like, I'm not going to listen to them while I'm eating dinner or whatever. Anyway, where was I going with this? Lean back listening is what we were talking about. Like having that experience and like realizing afterwards, I was like, this is actually really upsetting to me that this is not a thing that I can do anymore. And I'm like still, I still don't feel like I'm there yet. I just realized that I only ever watched the first season of My Brilliant Friend, and I was like, oh, there's like 3 more seasons. I would love to go watch the rest, but I was like, I don't think I'm not there yet. I'm not. So anyway, just like reclaiming, I don't know, like not having that experience with art. Like there is something just so depressing about that, to think it feels like there's a direct connection too between that relationship with art and with media, and the sort of like I read with my brain off, like I don't want to think about this too much attitude that you see on so much of like Book Talk, BookTube, like the bookish internet, of like just there's just like such a like pervasive and high level devaluing of art that I cannot even talk about it without spiraling. So that's it. That's the thought.
Yeah, I mean, like, because that's one of the things that one of the things that I also was thinking about is like remembering that I lived in an era before like streaming music, right? Like I bought CDs. Like this book made me remember like how much my relationship to, or like how much my expectations of music have really shifted, of like being able to like instantaneously just play whatever a song I want to hear, is actually very wild. It's very, very weird to be able to do that. Like I remember an era of like whatever music I have on the CD on my shelf, those are the songs that I have available. When I go, like when I'm on a car trip, I have to pick the CDs I want, and that is
Well,
that is the music.
I have to bring my beloved CD binder with me when I go.
Yes.
And my
Yeah.
CD binder, it's still in my bedroom at my mom's house, actually.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, like the physical like limitation of it is just so different.
Yep.
And also like just like how I find music is so different. Like I actually hate Spotify now lately, and I think other people have had this experience. I don't know if you have, but like I kind of hate Spotify because of the playlist. Like I find the personalization of Spotify, like my husband and I complain about this all the time. We can tell when you've listened to an album and you've gotten to the point where it's just like it's done the related artists, and it is now like taken you back to the average music that it thinks you want to hear, and you're back to listening to the same 5 artists, and you're just like, I don't want this. This is not what I want. It's just so weird. I hate it.
I broke up with Spotify at the end of last year.
Smart.
I'd been thinking about it for a really, really long time. I hate doing the whole like I'm not on all the like the thing, whatever.
Yeah. Okay, I talk about not being on TikTok.
Yeah,
And
I deleted TikTok. So, oh my god, I deleted TikTok. Now we're going off on a whole other tangent here, but I deleted TikTok.
Yeah.
After like the morning after the ban, and I woke up and I saw the fucking Dear Leader message, and I was like, this is disgusting, and I deleted the app. And then obviously, it came back 12 hours later, but it wasn't in the App Store. It is now.
Oh, right.
Back in the App Store. It just came back. I don't know how long ago, but there was like a few days there where I found myself like compulsively going like to look for it. Like I would go like I would like check the App Store. I was like checking the App Store to see if it was there, and I like something about that experience. I was like, this is actually. Like, this is sick. This is addict behavior.
Yeah.
This is actually disgusting, and this is ultimately a very good thing. And I feel like I genuinely feel so much. I still spend like too much time scrolling Instagram and I don't know, YouTube and whatever.
Yeah.
But I don't have nearly the same experience on those apps that I had on TikTok.
Right.
And like I do feel like I now have like layers of remove enough to have the awareness of how much garbage it was, like just how much fucking garbage. I'm not saying that it all is. I'm not saying that there are not people who are doing like good and cool things there, but like you are sifting through a lot of garbage to find those good and cool things, and like not intentionally. Like there's no intentionality to it. It's just happening to you. And I don't know. Anyway, but at Spotify I got rid of at the end of last year. Honestly, mostly because Mari was at my house, and when the Wrapped came out, and the AI, like the Wrapped this year was so bad. They had just laid off all these people, and there's all the AI stuff, and people were talking about it, and we had been like talking about like getting rid of all sorts of things at this time. And she was like, fuck this, I'm getting rid of Spotify. And I was like, yeah, okay, me too. Really,
it's a good call. Yeah,
I've had YouTube Premium for like 5 or 6 years, so the fact that I also was paying for Spotify at the same time is actually very stupid. So I was like, you know what, this is it. But the thing is, the reason I held on to it for as long as I did was all of the data stuff. And so separately, like that, like the data chapter, just really truly, it actually made me feel nauseous when I think about the relationship that I used to have to the Wrapped and like to all of that data. And this is not to shit on like the enthusiasm that people feel for that. Like, that's fine, but also it's not, there's somebody, she at the end of that chapter, so it is not data about listening to music, it is data about listening to Spotify. Like, that is what that is. It is not data about your tastes. It is not data about your preferences. It is data about how you listen to Spotify. But I never thought about it that way previously, and I don't know. I was gonna keep. There's like gonna be where we're talking, and then I'm gonna spiral.
Well, I guess, is this a good time to go to the red tab before I forget?
The red tab. My red tab on page 15. what Spotify had really done, this is a little bit of a pivot here, but what Spotify had really done was engineer a frictionless experience. The sense that the music just materialized from thin air, but similar to other app-enabled magic tricks of recent history, such as overnight packages and instant food delivery, frictionless is always an illusion. Frictionlessness is always an illusion. That specifically is like I don't know, a thing that I've been obsessing over for months. Mostly actually stemming from like fashion conversations, where there's a way in which like part of what like sent me down this whole rabbit hole was thinking about the ways that ever since I have been, you know, the like fuck fast fashion, whatever, this is all very bad, girly in people's lives, I get questions about like shopping and about like how to buy clothing, and like what, you know, questions about like fabrics and like things that you should be looking out for. And every time I have a conversation like that with someone, I keep thinking, you're missing the point. Like the point is actually buy less. I mean, like,
right,
like like step one, that's good. Like step one is please never buy things from Shein, from like don't buy clothing on Amazon, like whatever, etc., etc. Like that's step one. But like step two is that shopping has actually gotten way too easy. Like which feels like a weird thing to say in this precise political moment, but like shopping has gotten too easy. It should not be this easy to buy things, and like there are actually so many costs to all of the ways in which friction has been removed from our lives. And I just keep thinking about how like people asking those questions about like what are the things that I should look for. Bernadette Banner actually just put out a really great video about that if you are curious, but like that to me is that idea of like how to shop better is missing the real point, which is shop less. Like you and it should be harder. It actually should be harder. You actually should be working harder for it. It should not be like there's a way in which people are looking for an easy shorthand, where as long as I see it that it says 100% cotton, that I can click add to cart, checkout, and like that. You should have to work for it more. I actually think that there is something like corrosive and terrible about how easy that is. So anyway, the fact that was like part of the opener of this book, that was like very
that kind of reminded me. I think was it Taylor Benke did a video a while ago, like a few years ago, about bringing back gatekeeping.
Yes.
That's like what a lot of this book reminded me of, because like I think a big part of this book is about the fact that Spotify has become like this ultimate like in advocating it the way that it has, or as part of its marketing, it says that it is leveling the playing field. It has actually just made itself like the master of the playing field. And so like they're like a big part of this book is like scenes, like the importance of music scenes and like communities that are sometimes in person, sometimes online, they might be at shows, all of that stuff. And this is not something that the book is saying, but it's something I was thinking about related to what I remember from that video. But it's like, you know, sometimes these scenes are intimidating. Like there is like a level of like, I don't know, insecurity or fear you might attach to them. But there is also like a value to them being these very human curated places too, as opposed to having them curated in response to certain incentives that are not about the community itself. They're about Spotify and Spotify's profits and how they can, you know, widen the gap between what they spend and what they make. Bring back gatekeeping was the thing.
Gatekeeping.
Because one of the things I was remembering today was like one of the bands that my husband and I started like listening to a lot more in this past year is a band that we just like found at South by Southwest at a bar, like, and that feels like so quaint now, because like a lot of times like things that we find are things that like Spotify's like, hey, you should listen to this artist, or like you look up stuff and the internet is like, that means you'll like this thing. And so I hadn't had that experience in a while of just like, oh, I am just out in the real world and I come across this show and it's really good. And like we followed them to another venue that they were playing at, and it was like a lot of fun. It was just like a normal thing. And like I think like to bring it back to the book, like she talks about how there are these artists who do really, really, really well on Spotify and could not fill even like a small venue. Like they could not get a show to happen for them.
Yes. I mean, and you see that in yeah. Oh my god, I have so many things, so many feelings. So like, and that's a thing that, you know, like being in this sort of like creator space, but like that is a thing that people noted strongly in the move, like as TikTok was rising, that like
Right.
you had YouTubers who could like fill halls at VidCon in ways that TikTokers simply could not, even though they had like
Yeah.
TikTokers with the same sort of audience, with similar views, with whatever, but like the relationship there, because it was like was so lean back, that people just were not forming that same level of relationship with creators or with artists, you know, same thing, same deal there.
Right.
And like the ways in which, yeah, just the how it changes your relationship to art, to not be to have like discovery so removed from you. I also like very obsessive. Last year I got on this whole kick of like trying to make sure that I was going to museums more, and like part of the point of trying to go to museums more was mostly like trying to have like less mediated experiences of culture, to not have like my decisions or like what I was being drawn to be dictated by the
Yeah.
sort of infinite scroll in some sort of way. Obviously there's still either, you know, the whole thing with a museum is that it is curation, right? But like
Yeah.
it is it's like transparent curation in a way
Hmm.
that TikTok is not, in a way that Spotify's
Yeah.
Discover playlists is not. So I had the experience of getting, when I moved everything over from Spotify to YouTube Music, one thing I will say is that because I was on Spotify for so many years, I had like really neat like my playlists and like my folders of playlists, and I had a whole like system. That's the other reason why that's really the reason that I resisted for so long, was that like I
Yeah.
had my stuff set up, and I moved everything over to YouTube Music, and it was like, I don't know, man, here's all your music. Like I imported out all the data, but it's like, so it's like it's a mess in there.
Yeah.
But what it meant was that I was suddenly being like, I had like up at the top stuff that I hadn't really listened to in years, that I actually love, that like music that I genuinely love, that Spotify just wasn't
Yeah.
like showing me.
Yep.
And
Yeah.
I don't know, like I've been listening to a lot of the yeahs again, and like just stuff
Yeah.
that like I adore, music that I genuinely
Right.
adore, that I was not being surfaced by Spotify. And so it's been nice to be like have that slightly more, I don't know, I'm just like I feel like it is very, very important to try to create a more intentional relationship with how you're consuming art, consuming the things that other people are creating, which all of it, I feel, I don't know, yeah, I'm doing it again.
Yeah. I don't know. It's so weird to think back to like how I listened to music like in high school, which is like the most important phase of my music. I think a lot of people's like music, like not career, history is like the music you listen to in high school. And it's just yeah, and just like listening to the radio, I feel like even feels so much better now, because I feel like it's weirdly nice, even if I know that, like you said, like there's a person there who's deciding, like the museum, like what I'm gonna experience. I'm like, okay, well at least it's still, I don't know, it's just like it exposes me to more stuff. It's not perfect though. That's something that's hard. I mean, I guess there's nothing perfect, so that's really the thing to let go of.
Yeah, there's nothing perfect. That's really the thing to let go of. And I also think that like there is something to be said for like having and I don't know, something that years ago, or in the earliest days of Snark Squad Pod, that I was really firm on, like I would read reviews, read all sorts of things like before we went on the podcast, because my feeling at the time was always that there's no such thing as an opinion formed in a vacuum anyway. Like my opinion is always going to be formed by other people's. And I still, that hasn't changed, but I feel like it's like gone so far now in terms of how many other people's ideas, but they're also like recycled ideas themselves, but how much of that I'm ingesting constantly all the time, that I feel like having the opportunity to just like let a thought form on my own about about something, that I feel like, so like the more we get, I don't know, like the Spotify approach to TikTok, there's a way in which a lot of this the every app or thing that is trying to like steer you towards lean back is also like trying to steer you towards less engaged consumption at the same time. Like that's the whole thing. The whole thing is that you're not like thinking about it. And so I think that I don't know. I think that it is worth being as intentional as possible about making sure that you are giving yourself at least the space to engage with the thing. So yes, a museum is curated by a person, but I don't know. I can think whatever I want about the art that I'm looking at.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. And there's like
and I think the other
for me to have that thought, I guess, is the thing. Standing in a museum, looking at a piece of art, I have the space to like process and have the thought that I'm going to have in a way that I just don't have that.
Right. Yeah, and I think like if we want to get into the creator economy of it all too, the other big factor is the way that Spotify itself is shaping music. Like the thing that's actually made me think a lot about is Kindle and like Kindle Unlimited and like self-publishing on Kindle Unlimited. And I don't know enough about the mechanics of it, but it reminded me a little bit of that too. Like the more I think about it, the more I'm like, and I'm thinking about it specifically the way that I've like read Kindle Unlimited books in the past. And I say this with like a lot of affection for the writers on Kindle Unlimited. But like, I'm not reading them because I necessarily expect really like fantastic writing. I'm reading them because, especially like last year when my brain was like absolute mush, it's like this is the thing I can consume. But like it is written in a way that I think it's also meant to theoretically like optimize the ways that the authors themselves are making money, which is fair. Like obviously, like get your money, like you're publishing. I like that's not what I'm taking issue with. I think like this book, like what it's more about is trying to understand the ways that what like the culture that's now like so pervasive is really being shaped by people who don't necessarily actually care about the culture. Like I was also thinking, like bringing it back to the gatekeeping thing, I was also thinking about like how the other way I used to discover music, like one of my core memories is like being a teenager and learning about Regina Spektor and MIA and like all of these magazines that I was reading, and like that was like what got me to listen to them, and like they became a core thing. Like you know, and like that's just like not the way things really work, and that's a big like tension in this book for a lot of the people who are working on playlists at Spotify. Was they started out feeling like, oh, I'm doing this really cool, like helping people find good music. But then as Spotify started to shift and realize that the ways it was going to make more money was by pushing music that's like really more about that lean back listening and not really necessarily even being transparent about the fact that these artists don't really exist necessarily in the form that they claim to on Spotify. Like, yeah, just like that's shaped like it's like weird to have our culture so shaped by people who like really just don't seem to really care about it.
Don't give a shit. Yeah, I had a subscription to Alternative Press when I was in high school. Oh man, looked forward to that every month. I was so sorry. I think it was monthly action. I don't remember the interval at which this magazine came out.
I was like a basic hipster. I was like, I'm gonna read Nylon, and that's gonna be like how I find my.
I had AP. AP was the one that I was like the most devoted to. There was like a hot minute there where I had Rolling Stone, but my music magazines were. I briefly had like for like a year there. I think I had a Spin magazine subscription too. But I never read that, so I was like that one's gotta go. My music magazines were like my prized possessions in high school. That was like
well, okay, so now that we're talking about magazines, the other thing that this book made me think a lot about was actually Substack, because it made me think about the way that Substack is creating this platform for writers. And like now there's like, just like on every other platform, like this is not calling out Substack in particular. YouTube has this, TikTok, like once you have these platforms with these like kind of rules of engagement, like people start to understand like, oh, if you do XYZ, you will make more money, you will build your audience, all of this stuff. And so that means that it shapes the final product that happens. And so like Substack, I think, is kind of doing that to writing in a way, because they are basically essentially becoming a platform of writing. And like their goal is not like, is to support creators for the sake of making money.
Well, yeah. And to go back to your point about like the Kindle Unlimited like writers and the musicians in this book who are adjusting their what they're creating towards the like algorithmic outputs. Like the point there isn't any of the individual creatives making their choices in response to the system that exists. It is the system that exists, and like what kinds of things are being created for that. I think in the chapter talking about artists creating for Spotify, there's an artist who Liz Pelly interviews is basically like, I like, fine, make all of that, but I want to know what the music that you're not making sounds like what is it that you aren't making, because all of your creative energy is going into this. What art is the world never going to get to hear because you have like dedicated yourself towards the creation of like streaming fodder, which is fine. Like, it's not like, the point isn't that, but the point is more like, what would you create if you were actually given the space to, and like, what are we missing out on by depriving people of that space. Despair.
I feel haunted by that.
Once again. That was I read that was a part where like I read it and immediately said like oof, like let out a loud oof, just oh no. There was a right around there had a couple like of just like random reaction moments. That was an oof. There was another one where they were talking about like when they're talking about like the sped up playlist and the slow down playlist, and Spotify being like, here's you're a smart listener, here's the stems, just like do what you want with it. I wrote you in giant letters. Because what the hell. So
it's so bleak sometimes. To make things on the internet.
We call ourselves on the curation team the elected officials of the Spotify user base. Be serious.
Elected by who?
Elected by whomst. I tell ya. Oh, I gotta find. I had one. There was something in here that was like a really good. My other favorite thing on Nonfiction Book Club, my personal like meme that I'm building is like good academic burns,
right.
I feel like I had a couple, but who can say I feel like I had most of my tabs are actually just despair, so oops all despair.
I think it's maybe this is like that frictionless thing again, because I think the thing that is about the platform, but I think the reason why it was so important for her to start the book with the context of piracy is that it's also about us as consumers and our expectations of how we get music. Because I think this is basically like you're talking about with the fast fashion. Like, should we really be expecting that I should be able to just open up an app and access any music in the world? Or should I instead be required to be going to a store and to find the CD and have like really just like this narrow library of music I can listen to unless I've like paid for it in some way? That isn't just streaming.
This comment in the chat.
And that I think is like,
oh no, go ahead.
Oh yeah, making things on Etsy for that.
Finish your thought. Sorry.
Oh yes. No, I think like I think this is like one of the weird things about the internet, because part of what's so hard about like doing something like YouTube, it's like you make it because it's fun. You make it because or not everyone, right? But like a place like BookTube, we all get in here because you're not going onto BookTube to make the big bucks. You're there because you're like, this is a fun place to be. And then like people who are successful, it is sort of like, well, at some point you're making things that other people are consuming. Why shouldn't you get financial like compensation for that? And so, but like just the way that things are available, it's so hard sometimes. Like, and I do this too, where like on the consumer side, you just get so used to just not paying for something that you're like, well, like that just means it's free. And that isn't what it means necessarily.
That isn't what it means. There's The chat comment that I was going to call out the that's like the effect on the Etsy effect on local craft fairs that I sell at. There are so many similar vendors that make things for the algorithm. It's wild. Which like, yeah, like you see the sort of real world implications of everything that we're talking about. And then Colby, not just our expectations, but how Spotify is redefining those expectations for us through their engineering. In embracing vibes, we've adopted the language that the algorithms use to perceive and organize us. Yeah, like that's one of the things that I found like most haunting too, is the bit about like the, I don't know, like the taste and preferences of it all, where like, yes, on the one hand, art is culture work, which means that it is about other people. Like there is no I don't want to turn this into like a question of individualism, of like I need to individually go off and decide my taste, my individual unique special snowflake taste or whatever. Like that's not the thing. But also there's a way in which like platforms like Spotify have given us the false sense of like both a broader both like culture of like what broader culture is, but also like given us a weird sense of what our individual preferences are. Like that's the thing that really about the Spotify Wrapped that I was like, oh no, the thing where like I can never unthink, can never unhave this knowledge of how actually deeply fucking dystopian it is to turn the way that I listened to Spotify, which like the feedback loop of it all, like the way that I was listening to Spotify was then like Spotify was in turn shaping my listening, and like creating that whole situation. And then at the end of the year being like, this is who you are, special girl.
Yeah.
And
well, see, I'm never special because my Wrapped is like, you listen to Taylor Swift all the time. Sure. It's like, yeah. But even
then, even like the year that Taylor Swift was my number one artist, it's still like, that's the thing of like, that's still like a thing that's still trying to like sell you an idea of yourself.
Right.
That is not, I don't know.
Very true.
I listened to a lot of other shit that year too. So I don't know.
Like,
I don't know.
Yeah. This is not what you meant, but when you were saying individualism, this was actually reminding me of the other reason I was thinking about Substack, because Substack has really been the place where a lot of writers, especially writers from like organized legacy media places, go to when they are no longer in the organized legacy media places. And so one of the points of this book that she brought up that really stuck with me was she was talking about how Spotify is really selling artists, or kind of almost like, or they're really selling the idea of artistry as like an individual creation. Like she actually goes through and like there's some of their marketing materials and like counts how many times they mention like a solo artist versus like group artists, like groups, music groups, you know, collaborations. And I just thought that was a really interesting point, because I hadn't thought about it in those terms before, where like, yeah, it's not just the way that they are like devaluing art, but also that they are treating art as a very individual solo experience, when really a lot of times it is very collaborative. And that's kind of what I see also happening with Substack. And it's interesting because I think the main complaint that ends up happening with a lot of those writers who end up going to Substack is a lot of people are like, oh, I learned why they needed to be at a legacy media institution, because they need an editor. And like, you go off, you write your thing without an editor, and like you can have like a good baseline of writing, but still it's not the same. Like there is a very different experience of writing for yourself versus like writing for your own publication as yourself versus the things you write for other people. I say as a person whose YouTube videos that I make myself are very verbose. The things that I make for other people go through editing, and there's a lot of like, there's a difference. Like there's a difference in the art that I make for myself and the art that I make with other people for other people in these other contexts. And by art, I'm using the term loosely. I'm talking again about me.
we need to reclaim it. I think more people.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
think that people who think of themselves as creators actually need to start reclaiming the concept of
Yeah.
being artists. But that's a separate. That's
Mhm.
well, it's not separate. It's related to this. That's not the point I was going to make. It's
Yeah.
it's actually very much related to what we're talking about today. But
Yeah.
I have like I don't know, an almost like flip side to that, which is like,
Hmm.
so it's different, but also there's like a tremendous value. Anybody who has created things with a team has also seen the benefit of like working with that team. Like the things that you're going to make are different,
Yeah.
obviously, because they're, you have
Right.
a
Oh, yeah.
fire, you have a
Absolutely.
whatever,
Yeah.
but like there's like the value that adds, and there's a way in which these systems are making it increasingly impossible for collaboration to exist. Like that, the chapter where
Yeah.
there were the first 0035 census, the hardest chapter, talks about like how much money they're counting at. Basically their goal was, if we can estimate that you're probably making $40,000 a year, then we could regard you as living off of your art, which is batshit.
Crazy.
But also
Yeah.
separately does not take into account that very few of these musicians are like one man shops. Like, so there's other people who that
Yeah.
$40,000 is being split amongst
Yeah.
multiple people, right? Something that we talk about a lot at work is, we got off, we're winding down our presence on TikTok before the ban, and like we haven't came back. We did like a goodbye video, and that's like where SciShow's TikTok.
Yeah.
The most recent video on SciShow's TikTok is basically telling you go to YouTube.
Yeah.
And that's like where we've left it. We make like reels and shorts sometimes only that are like sponsored. Like the only time that we do vertical short form now is when a sponsor comes to us, and there are people who are like, they really want to, that's what they really want, and so they pay us enough money that we're like, well, we kind of actually have to do this, because the financial logic of those spaces do not allow you to create anything that more than one hand has to touch. Like the second you have to pay two people to work on something, it doesn't make sense. The money isn't there. Like you simply cannot do it. And the only, really truly, even like the, horizontal long form YouTube, the only reason that is viable is because of like individual sponsors and contributor. Like, Patreon is like a third of our revenue, I think. Actually, I gotta look at it. I take it back. Don't say that. I gotta actually. I made that up.
Headlines tomorrow.
Yeah. I actually don't know. I actually would have to look at it. It's like a shifting reality. But really, the biggest thing is people like, sponsors and grant people with deep pockets who just come and give us money to make things, because YouTube, you cannot employ the Spotify, the SciShow team is 16 people plus like another like half dozen cross-functional people. You cannot YouTube isn't you can't do that on just YouTube. Like that's simply not possible to employ that many people. And like, I don't know. So all of that to say, so like on the one hand, like, yes, there's a way in which these platforms are sort of dictating the creation, because you're no longer creating by your own sort of like goals and aspirations and wishes and whatever, but there's also a way in which they're rendering it less and less possible for people to collaborate and work together, which I feel, anybody who actually cares about like cultural production would say that's bad. If cultural production can only happen in isolation, then like that, there's something very dark about that. I keep every time I can't end a thought anywhere but
it's bad.
Hey guys, so it's dark out here. Any other thoughts on
internet
Mood Machine?
I feel like we could talk for hours, but unfortunately, hours are limited in the day.
Wow, what the heck?
But this was great.
Cool.
This is like one of our few like this book just came out books that we've done, and I'm glad we read it.
Yeah, I loved this. I'm also very glad we read it. It's gonna be, I feel like, one day. We're coming up on the 5-year anniversary of Nonfiction Book Club. I feel like
years.
Yes, April 2020. What? April of 2020 is when we started.
But we've only been doing it for like 2 days.
I know. So we gotta, I don't know. I'm just gonna put that out there.
We gotta think of something. Yeah,
we gotta do something with our collection. I don't know what that
Yeah.
song is, but anyway, tell the
Yeah.
people what we're doing next.
So we don't know when we're doing it, I think, officially, but we do know the book we are doing. We will let you know when we're doing it. I was like, I did all the work to figure out what we should read and not when we should read it. Ooh, a book bracket. Yeah, that could be fun.
Oh, we did talk about the book bracket. That could
yeah.
be a fun
Okay.
thing to do.
The next book we're going to be reading is Empire Incorporated, The Corporations That Built British Colonialism by Philip J. Stern. This is one of those books that I bought on a whim from Barnes & Noble's because I thought the cover was great. And also I was like, this is a topic I'll want to read one day. But then it's been just sitting on my bookshelf for a while. Mm-hmm. And I told Nicole that if we don't read this, I might never read it. And that would be... So here we are. I will write the... title.
Like, that is as good a reason as any for us to pick a book. That's really like kind of the main reason that we have picked books, or that we picked books in the beginning. I feel like that actually hasn't been for a minute now. It's been a while.
Yeah,
since
it's true.
It's been the sort of driving thing with our preferences. This book was truly just, I was scrolling through a list of like recent, it was like best nonfiction. I was looking at a list of the best nonfiction books of 2024, and then down at the bottom of the list it was like related, and then this book, and I was like, wait, let's do this 2025 book. Look at us go. Incredible.
The most recent-ish book. It's a baby book.
A baby book. Anyway, well, thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you.
We will see you at some point in the future. Yeah.